Okay, kind of trying to expand on the process and visual language of charcoal on plain, uncoated 110-pound Staples brand cardstock is this piece right here. I did the watermill and waterfall composition just so we can kind of do a little compare contrast type of thing with some fairly recent compositions that I did using these same stamps right here. But I wanted to do this because I wanted to play around with values and shading on a structure to make it look a little bit more three-dimensional. And then waterfalls have that frothy, kind of misty, churning water at the base of it. And I thought this composition right here would be perfect for that because we have both the sharp and the very soft down here to contrast against one another. And I used a lot of the same techniques that I do when applying dye-based inks to this charcoal-based monochromatic piece. So it involves multiple spray sealing processes with a workable fixative, okay? So getting the composition down, applying the charcoal, spray fixing it all down, and sealing it all in. But it's called workable fixative because you can add more things to it. Then I went back in and I added more white pastel work into the piece, sprayed it off again, and then dipping into some of the things that I use all the time with glossy cardstocks, coated cardstocks, etc. With the white pigment ink, okay, you can use any kind of brand you have, and the Dr. Barton's Bleed Proof White, which I love using. So all of that kind of that light mist and illuminated moisture type of effect, which, I got a head start with the impressions if you watch this video, and the white pastel, but that, these two things right here in terms of adding a soft illumination to a certain area, and then adding a very sharp illumination in the form of highlights, textures, water, splashes down at the base and whatnot, really add to this piece, I think. Otherwise, it was looking a little bit muddy, when we're talking about, a charcoal, application of media right here. It's not really made for really specific targeted areas. It's, charcoal drawings are better for like large scale drawings and whatnot, like life drawing or whatever, or, quick sketches, not detailed little, impressions of rubber stamps. So, that being said, these two types of things really come into play rather well in adding in those sharp little types of details within this piece right here. So anyways, fun stuff to do, and fun experimenting and learning about different types of surface and media combinations. So if you watch this video, I hope you enjoy it. If you have any questions, drop me a note in the comment section. Okay, another test video of the Staples 110-pound plain uncoated cardstock. It's basically a thick copy paper, is what this paper amounts to. I'm starting to kind of warm up to this paper, trying to discover what it's capable of, what type of media or media combinations and processes could look, could maximize the qualities of this paper a little bit. And as I mentioned in my previous videos, I don't foresee this being like my favorite paper to work on by any means, because I think it can be limiting, but it does open up some possibilities that I just don't have with your coated, smoother types of papers, okay? And my previous video using charcoals on the surface I thought was really fun, and I was thinking about a different process that I can kind of add to the mix, okay? And that involves spray fixing the surface after I've applied all those charcoals, and then utilizing some other types of media that I'm a little bit more familiar with. I'm not a charcoal, artist. I haven't used those charcoals in quite a while, until my previous video, and it was just something that I, required to have in art school. So I still have all that type of stuff, but I don't pop it out and go out and do charcoal drawings or anything like that. I'm doing other things basically, so it's kind of fun to pull them out and kind of experiment with them. Okay, so anyways, I'm utilizing the Versafine ink, okay, because this absorbent, very absorbent, matte, uncoated paper is going to, because of the absorbent factor, quality of the paper, it's not going to give us as dark an impression as we would get with a coated paper, where the inks are being applied and applying in kind of a darker saturation. Okay, now that Versafine's just about as dark a black as I know in the crafting world, okay? But even so, stamping it out onto this very absorbent paper like that, in the pigment, staying largely on the surface, that's still like a 95% gray or something like that, over 100% black, okay? Now, if I stamped it out in a dye-based ink, it would look much lighter than that. Okay, but so that being said, the very nature of this not having that super high contrast of black and white, from these initial impressions like that, already kind of lends itself to kind of more of a, a semi-aged type of look. All right, so I thought that would be perfect for things like charcoals and whatnot, when you're working on something like this. All right? That's the concept that I'm working on. Okay, so that was the babbling brook right here. By the way, that was the old, or the watermill large stamp. Okay, now I'm just adding in some more rocks off of the right-hand side of this babbling brook, just to continue that out here on the perimeter to fill in that space. Okay. And I think I'll add another rock down below here. You could just, you could go with the babbling brook down here a little bit too. This one happens to be the boulders with lichen. And I'll put it at a little bit of an angle here to give us a little bit of foreground. Something like that. Okay, this will be a kind of a little body of water down here. What I'm planning on doing is trying to apply some white pigment ink in the way that I usually do on coated papers, okay? And giving it kind of that misty feel. But you can't do it over charcoal, but if we spray fix it enough and we seal off all the, the pigment ink impressions and charcoal, I'm thinking that we could probably get some pretty good applications of the white pigment ink on here. The white pigment ink, it just, I've always say it on all my videos, but it can solve all kinds of lighting issues. It can enhance what you have from a textural standpoint, and it can just, I don't know, it enhances the things that are good about a certain area, and it can kind of obscure things that are not so good or even bad. It can eradicate them. So I don't know, it's like a pigment ink can be quite an ally. Okay, I'm going to try to transition this where it's really dry down here, middle dry to wet up there. Okay, so I'm trying to create a transition. Okay, it's not just dry and wet, it's like drier, a little bit drier, medium to wet up top. Okay, so we get these transitioning tree impressions here, hopefully, kind of like that. I have a harder time kind of transitioning pigment ink, just because it's so thick. I have an easier time doing this with dye-based inks. Okay, let me try to do a better job at that. Yeah, I'm taking a lot off the bottom. Maybe I don't even need to color the bottom. Okay, so like that. And the reason why I'm transitioning it is so we can create some separation between those background trees and the foreground trees like that. See that? How it creates a little bit of depth. If it was as dark on the base, where it goes in back of these trees, we wouldn't be able to see the silhouette of this, the foreground trees, right? Or I don't know, mid-ground trees, I guess. Okay. Let's make some of these trees a little bit lighter, so maybe I'll transition, that bottom part, but then I'll go all the way up top here, so I've removed a lot of the ink up there. So, okay, now I'm going to stamp this over the top of this watermill, so I'm just going to do an easy mask. You don't have to mask it off a ton because we've wiped off a lot of the ink, right? And we've transitioned it. So we create this tree that looks a little bit more distant in the background. Okay? I'm not terribly worried in concept, I think, with our applications of media on here. The foundation right here, don't get me wrong, is important, but it's just not as important as you might think. Okay, so anyway, we have something like this, and there's continuity. You want things to blend together well, but if there's a little bit of kind of compositional problems here and there, you get spaces in between things or gaps. By the time you apply all that media on here, I don't know. It doesn't really matter quite as much as one might think when you initially stamp things out. That's why I don't worry about things like in the beginning of the process and during the process. I always tell people, just, if you're running into problems, if things aren't kind of looking great to you, I always recommend just stay with it and keep developing it and just keep working the scene, and you'll get some great results usually, And as I've said before, a lot of people say, hey, I was going to toss this, but I decided to keep working it. Say, some of those pieces are the best pieces I've ever seen from people, and oftentimes they expand their kind of techniques and abilities by sticking with something and having to overcome something that's not looking so good in some areas during a part of the process. Really develops their skills, and oftentimes they come up with new ideas by having gone through that process. Okay, adding some of these reeds in the foreground. Now if you notice right down here, I've done this in a different video. Instead of just going like right in front, all down here, what I've done is I've masked off some of those reeds like that. Okay. So they're in back of the rock, and I put some reeds in front of the rock. That's a little tiny, tiny little tweak there. Just cover something up, stamp it behind, take it off, stamp it in front of it, and then you've sandwiched this rock in here, so that it gives your foreground a little bit more dimension like that. And when you do all little types of things like that, cumulatively, it adds up to kind of a greater whole, It's like the overall, or what is that? Something greater than the sum of its parts. All those little types of techniques like that from cumulatively add up. But that's not a hard technique right there. But all those little things, or just the wiping off of a tree, instead of stamping it out mono value, when you have that transitioning thing like that, that's not a hard technique like that. But already we have a lot more richness in terms of depth by having multi-value impressions. This one's lighter than this one. But also, within the impressions, one part's darker, one part's lighter, okay? Now, I didn't do that for everything. I didn't, wipe off certain parts, down here or on the mill. You could. But just doing little minor tweaks like that, it expands on your kind of textural range of your pieces, okay? All right, so anyway, I have my box of charcoals. I don't know if anyone's watched the previous video. You watched me kind of fumble around with things. Okay, now here's my concept, okay? I'm going to try to utilize some of this white pigment ink in this scene, okay? So where this is going to be applied is it's going to be in my lighter areas, okay? All right, now how do you approach lighting in a scene like this, okay? Well, my general take on lighting, this is a really basic kind of concept right here, but I do it in just about, I don't know, probably 80% of my scenes. This is what I like to do in general. You don't have to do this either. It's not, you know, a rule hard and fast, but it just makes it easy. You just make your perimeter of your scene kind of darker, all right? And then what I do is I divide up the area. So in this way it's divided up with the Lakeside Cove here, but you see this area of light right here and an area of light right here, okay? Light source, reflected light down here, okay? And then what you do is you just work the shadows of certain things within these spans. Let's say this whole thing is kind of light right here. Well, there's these rocks in here, so you just kind of put the shadows down here at the base of the rocks, okay? Now, with small types of scenes like this, you know, you're not gonna, I don't think I'm going to have like 5 different areas of light sources or something like that, okay? Even a half-page scene like this one, okay? So I'm going to have this, you know, kind of a little bit of a vignette up here. And then we have our structure in here. I like to keep structures, the rooftops a little bit lighter than the sides, okay? Because it's being top lit. So it's like my hand here, you know. You can see my, you know, the side of my, you know, or underside of my fingers right here are a little bit, you know, darker, and the light's coming from above, right? So you have light up here, dark down here. Now I have lights coming all over, so I mean this is not a great example or whatnot, but you know, you take this box right here, that's the same color as right up here, right? But here it is on the vertical edges. You just make that darker. So what this looks like right here is light, dark. On the structure, because it's, you know, angled, we have light up here, darker on the sides, right? There's a little bit of that rooftop right there. And down here, you know, you have all these different little shadows and rocks, but here's my body of water. I'm going to have that a little bit light in here and darker out here. That's the same thing as I'm doing up here, okay? You don't have to see these things as like totally different things that have to be approached in completely different ways. It's not. I mean, you could, but I don't do it. You know, I don't make things so complex like that. Now, see down here, like I was saying in rocks, there are darker areas down here, right? So you just reiterate that in your shadows. This feels like a fairly dark piece of light charcoal. It's hard, okay? There's some charcoals that are really soft and much darker. I'm going to start off with this one. I think this one's a pretty good one to start off with. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of reiterating what's already on these rocks. If there's a light area of the rock, then don't color it in, you know? But if there's a darker area of the rock, you're just kind of reiterating that somewhat. It's going to look weird if it's just on one rock, so you just kind of repeat this same type of pattern. Don't worry about, with, you know, things like charcoal, about overdoing things. Like say, oh my gosh, I should have left that rock top a little bit lighter. Then you just take an eraser. Where'd my eraser go? And you just remove that charcoal. I would use a kneadable eraser if you're doing charcoals or graphite. But if you don't have that, you know, use a pink pearl or whatever. Okay, remember what I said about vignettes? Kind of a darker edge. Yeah, you can kind of fill in this whole area right here. I like to keep my falling water lighter because it kind of creates a visual pathway. So this water is coming down this way, and here's the falls, right? So leave this area kind of light in here. I mean, you can come in there and, you know, it doesn't have to be completely stark white, but I would leave it generally lighter. And then you have that that mist at the base of the waterfalls down here, you know, so you can kind of keep that a little bit lighter. I don't know if I want this area stark white in here, this water area, but just in general, I'm going to keep it fairly light This charcoal is almost so hard. I don't know. I don't know how they rate this. It's been, like 30 years since I bought any charcoal, so I don't even remember. But like the graphite, they have the B and H, in terms of the softness of them, the value of them, dark, light, whatnot. And I'm wondering if that's the way they still rate, or if that's how they rate charcoal. Because I'm not getting too dark out of it. Maybe that's good, though, because I'm a little bit more in control of it, over how much I'm applying. I got a little bit dark right there, but like I said, you can always use an eraser when it comes to dry media like this. Not everything, like colored pencil, it's a little bit harder to erase, but... Okay, so see that right down here? See where it's a little bit darker on the perimeter like this? I didn't go too dark over here because we have that other fall right there. But I can hit this like in the shadow for that rock. Okay, so anyways, let's kind of hit this a little bit. I don't remember how to hold my charcoal properly. Let me see if I can do it. I mean, it's coming back to me a little bit, but... I was never, I was never the best at, like, any type of dry media, like charcoals and graphite, stuff like that. I'm more of a kind of a pen and ink illustrator. Technical pens, stuff like that. You put something like that in my hands, I'm a little bit more comfortable with that methodology. But even that being said, like I've said in my previous video, what you can do is you can kind of figure out your core aesthetics. What do you like about, or what do you like in art? Do you like contrast? Do you like temperature changes? Do you like what is it in particular? What is the strongest thing? Well, for me, I tend to like a lot of texture, and I really like lighting. I'm a kinesthetic person in general. A lot of people you might guess that I'm more visual, but I'm not. I'm more kinesthetic. So if I am using things like color, value for one thing, in terms of light and darks, are really important to me. I like lighting. I like scenic lighting, okay? But then I also like to play around with things like temperatures, okay? Because temperatures, are kind of a kinesthetic aspect of color. So those are the types of things that I focus on when I'm utilizing color. So, but in something like this, I can still focus in on texture, for sure. Texture becomes a little bit more, in the forefront when you're utilizing kind of a monochromatic palette, because you don't, we're not aware of all these different, the different hue, temperature, intensity, so forth, So what we have here is we have value and texture and lighting in here. There's still a lot of visual language going on in a piece, even if it's absent of color. Okay, so here's that thing that I'm doing on the watermelon. There's a couple areas of the watermelon that didn't stamp out perfectly. I need to put more paper underneath my stamping, on my stamping surface. But it doesn't matter because you can just fill it in with, with like this charcoal. Okay, now I don't want this rooftop and things like that just to be completely stark white. I like it lighter on the top, but there's also things like shadows that you might have on the rooftop there. So by and large, I kind of colored in the entire, horizontal area of the piece. Let me get some areas right here. Kind of going with the grain of the wood. Some wood is going to be a little bit darker, you know, so you can kind of texturize it a little bit, like this. Hit more of that grain. Okay. Don't forget all the different parts of the water, like the water wheel and whatnot. You hit the brickwork, so on and so forth. Okay, it's looking a little rough right now, but you know we still have a lot of media that we can apply. Okay, let's see, going in and kind of rendering out these rocks a little bit more. I want these rocks to look really round and have a lot of volume in them. Okay, volumes in terms of, not in terms of sound, but in terms of kind of a three-dimensional feel to it. Okay, I'm switching to an extremely dark piece of charcoal right here. No wonder it's so worn out. It applies so quickly. Okay. If this was the equivalent of in graphite, it would be like a 6 or an 8B or something like that. It's practically just falling right off of this as I apply it. Maybe we can go a little bit darker on the perimeter like this. Okay. Oh my gosh, this is so soft. I'll never work enough in charcoal where this is going to be real kind of comfortable to work with. Now see, I'm going a little bit more than what I want, because again, I can kind of apply some down like that, and then I can kind of blend it in. You can blend it in with your finger too. I have so much on my finger of that one. Let's put some streaks in that sky up here. Okay, now this is a chamois. It's like an artist chamois, but you can use anything. You can use like a sponge or Kleenex or paper towel, you know, to do this type of thing too. Okay, so kind of just smoothing things out a little bit. It's kind of blending things in somewhat. It's really removing a lot of it too. But there's a lot of, you know, the chamois is really stained, so it's kind of blending it out as well. You get kind of a softer looking application of things. It's really like, it's almost like finger painting or something, doing this. Okay, get those corners down there. It's almost removing too much, you know. It's like, oh my gosh, I just lost everything that I just applied. But the thing about the chamois too, it's kind of getting into the grooves a little bit more. Some things become a little bit too textural, whatever. You know, just go in and smooth it out with this. Okay. All right. Okay, now one of the things I was playing around with yesterday was this Conte Pencil. Look at that. I think I have like 3 of these, and this one's like brand new. It comes to show you how much I used it in art school. Probably hardly ever. You know, unless I had 10 of them, which I know I didn't. But this is kind of like it's a little bit more of a controlled application, you know, because it is a pencil. It's not so much like a Conte crayon, it's a little bit more chalky than that. So it's something a little bit more akin to a, you know, the charcoal that I was using, the stick charcoal. Okay, and going in. So I'm just kind of reiterating some of these shadows that are already on the rocks. The darker area at the base of the rocks, you can kind of just fill in more. I don't know, maybe this Conte pencil is maybe all I needed over the stick. This was working really fantastic. Going on with each individual little brick there, under the eaves. Even after yesterday, just doing one charcoal piece, I feel a little bit more comfortable, or a lot more comfortable than yesterday's lesson experiment. It's not really a lesson, but kind of more experiment. Okay. Kind of increasing the contrast here and there. I should have stamped my oak branch up here as an overhang. I don't think I can do that. Maybe if I fix everything, but I'm not sure how the Versafine would stamp over the top of a sealed piece, even if it was a matte sealed piece. So, I don't know. I could try, but I don't know. Maybe. I'll see. I'll see what it feels like after I spray seal things. Okay. So anyways, we have some different ranges of value. That still looks a little bit light down here. Let's get some, maybe some like little striations in the water, like some streaks. Something like that, and then I'll kind of smooth them out a little bit. All right, and let's do the same thing up here in the sky. I like to have kind of similar patterns repeated, or if certain patterns are around in a piece, I like to repeat it somewhere, certain types of applications of something. Especially if it's very visible and it stands out, it's kind of good to repeat it somewhere else in the piece. And that just it kind of creates a kind of a visual continuity and thus visual harmony. So those little striations up there like that, then you have the same type of thing going on down here. Maybe, maybe not to that degree, but I don't know, I guess you could, but that. So you create continuity between foreground and background, like that. Okay. Just kind of even it out a little bit, smooth it out a touch. All right, let's see. This is where the eraser comes in too. So I was mentioning that you can go in and remove some things. You got to be careful about removing too much. If if you only want a little bit kind of removed. There's a little bit of a horizon glow back there. And these trees down here, where I transitioned them from dark to light, wet to dry, I want to utilize some of that with the white pigment ink. So I'm going to remove some of this charcoal, or whatever I've drawn in these areas, Conte crayon, or Conte pencil areas. because I really want to test out and see what that pigment ink can potentially look like over the top of this surface. I have a feeling it'll improve it a lot. It's kind of my, I don't know, it's my go-to medium for general scenic repair. Okay, so see that right down those striations. I think that helped from a textural standpoint and kind of pattern standpoint. And one thing in this piece right here that's missing for me, it's missing a lot of the lighter areas, but that's where I'm hoping that the white pigment ink will come in. I'm hoping that it can influence this piece to a fairly, good degree. We'll see. I think that's what I want from it, at least. I want this textural range, I guess, to be happening in here that I'm just, not going to get strictly from an additive process, okay? This is going to be additive, but it almost looks subtractive because you're putting, like, white back into it, okay? All right, so anyways, I'll need to spray seal this, and what I'm going to spray it with will be the Cryline Workable Fixative. See, protects pencil, pastel, and chalk drawings. Charcoal, too. Prevents smudging and wrinkling. Allows easy rework. Okay, that's what the workable fixatives are for. And acid-free and archival. Okay, so anyways, I'll do that. I'll probably need to give this about 3 or 4 kind of light coats, okay? Okay, this has been sprayed. I gave it a pretty good, I don't know, 4 or 5 light coats, and that workable fixative really dries fast. The glossy one, I don't know what it has, acrylic in there. Takes a little bit longer to dry, but this workable fixative, I don't know. I just sprayed this like 1 minute ago or something like that, and it's already pretty dry. One of the things that I was aware of that happens in this, let's say if I use like a white pastel or something like that over the top of a darker area, it'll look lighter, but sometimes when you spray it, this becomes really transparent. And it disappears when you spray it, okay? But I noticed a lot of the more subtle types of things with the grayscale also kind of disappeared too, because I gave this a pretty good coating because I really want to apply some other media on here potentially. And testing out some of this area. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's not 100% dry, but anyways, the contrast in here became a little bit more extreme. Okay, so here's what I'm thinking here. I lost some of the more kind of nuanced subtleties of the, the black media applications on there, where I applied it lighter. So what I'm going to do, I'm thinking I'll use this white pastel, I think, and then what I'll do is I'll spray seal that in before I get to the hero arts now. I don't know, though, but I just don't know if that branch will stamp on there. Let's go ahead and try it, okay? It could resist the ink, I don't know. But let's give it a try here. I think if this pad is juicy enough, maybe I'll get a good impression. I'm not sure. Let's give it a test here. I don't know. We're supposed to be testing things out, right? Maybe I am thinking about this in terms of a finished product too, or a finished piece, where I want it to look, I want to get a good end result here, but I don't know. Let's stay in the spirit of experimentation. Yeah, it's not too bad. Okay. So it's stamped out right over the top of that workable fixative. Huh. Have to keep... Now, okay, now if I use like a Conte crayon or a waxy type of thing on here, and then spray sealed, I don't know if it would have worked. Like say if you do colored pencils or something like that and color everything in, and then you spray fix it. I don't know, stamp it, this thing on top of like wax. I mean, you'd have to give it a pretty good coating, and maybe that would be too textured then. I don't know. But this one doesn't look too bad. In fact, I don't really see any difference between those initial impressions and this one going over the top of all that charcoal. Yeah, okay, that looks just fine. But anyways, that kind of capped off the top of the composition. I almost need some more down here too, maybe. I don't know. Okay, that's going to make it look too busy. Okay, let's try some of this white pastel in here. Okay, now this is what I'm looking for in particular, okay? And this is what I was going to do with my, or I will do with the Hero Hues, but I thought I can kind of expedite the process maybe with this just white pastel here. Okay, now this is where the Workable Fixative comes in. Just so when you're applying, like if I applied this on top of dry charcoal that I just applied, and I start doing this, it's going to start making this all gray, right? But if I spray fix this, now this layer of all that charcoal is sealed in, so I can apply the white, without getting, too much of a polluted type of application here. So, okay, so here's what I'm doing right here with the white. I'm kind of adding in this kind of misty and lighter area down below with this. I don't know, maybe I won't even need the the pigment ink. Okay. See that kind of misty feel to it right at the base there? Maybe it's adding in too much, Your perfect, use your God-given blending tools, with your finger here. Thus. Okay. So it kind of gives it that nice textural quality to it. Okay, now down here in the water, we created those striations with the use of dark media, but leaving some light areas of the paper showing. But why not in those lighter areas you go and you can kind of reiterate, that streak right back in there. Where else did we do this? We did this up in the sky. Okay. Like so. We can let some of the light kind of behind the backlit trees seem a little bit more backlit with the use of this white pastel. See this area in here where it's being backlit? Okay. Let's kind of create a little bit more of that backlit glow. Okay. By applying that there, so now I've altered those trees quite a bit. Okay, now I'm going to spray seal this again, and this white is going to disappear a little bit, unless I'm very careful. So you can apply a little bit more than, or a lot more than what you think looks good, because it's not going to be as stark white. Now, if you like what's going on, I mean, you could just leave it as is, or you can just very lightly spray it and spray fix it, if you're not going to be doing anything else. But see this tree down in here, where it's all light in the back there? You can see that there's a little bit of illuminated fog or something like that in there. So you can kind of add a little bit more, and it kind of adds that soft touch. So you get this feeling of glowing light. Hopefully, that's the idea of it, at least, within this piece. So you have glowing light down here. You have happening up here. Back in these trees here and there, okay? This doesn't have to represent just fog. I mean, you can use this, to create, a little bit more of like a highlight on tops of rocks where, they're capturing light too. It's just, this is lighting. Where you do fog, fog represents illuminated moisture in the air, right? So it's, it's just lighting too. Here's the falls here, I can kind of come down and add some of this to the falls. that falling water, and it can seem a little bit more misty, those time-lapse shots of water where it looks like kind of fog or something like that. You can do that in here. Okay, so I've just kind of, done a few little streaks like that. Actually, that looks pretty good, I think. Like that. Kind of illuminate that water and make it a little bit more kind of mystical, magical. Like that. Okay, I like that on top of those rocks. Makes it a little bit more kind of from a kinesthetic standpoint, it makes them look a little bit kind of more soft and, I don't know, definitely illuminated. Illuminated by, I guess, soft light or whatever. Okay, so there's that. Let's put a little bit more lighting on top of the rooftop, maybe. We added some shadows. You can kind of go back in and illuminate the roof. Something like that. Okay. From a textural standpoint, it's kind of getting there a little bit. I'm really curious about that pigment ink, though. But I like where we can take this from a, just with this pastel. Okay. I think I put way too much right there. Let me just take a paper towel and wipe some of that off. Okay, I think that will do it. Let me go out and spray seal this again. And let's try a lot of experimenting with the pigment ink in there. Okay, back from coat number 2. I was kind of wondering about something. I'm wondering if we can color a little bit and add like a tinge of like another color in here. It's kind of rough, but I know this is a little bit of tan. I'm seeing if I can add a tinge of tone into this piece. Yeah, that's way too dark. I wouldn't want to do it anything really extreme, okay? Maybe just a little hint of color. I don't know that it's standing out quite a bit to me, even though it's like super subtle, just because it's the only thing that's kind of colored in here. Like if I had like a really faint blue, maybe I do. This is a cool gray. If you had like a, I don't know, like a 5% blue or something like that, maybe we can kind of add that in. I don't know, this is a cool gray right here. I don't know if I spray sealed it enough to where that's going to seal off the charcoal, because alcohol inks will just eat right through, spray sealant, because it's got a similar binder, alcohol will go into, that solvent there, but I don't know, you can see that there's a touch of like little color in there. I don't know if, I wouldn't have control over that. Oh! Okay, so let me try something with, we have this waterfall here, so that's a perfect opportunity for some Dr. Martens. This, I don't know, just overall, this needs a little bit of more of a textural kind of range in here that's happening, a variation. Maybe that's what I'm looking for, a textural variation. So I really like at the base of waterfalls or in skies, you know, kind of a little bit more of a random kind of application of media. And this is a little bit more random than doing it with a gel pen or a white paint pen, you know, just doing the splatter painting, okay? Just an old toothbrush, soaking up some Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof White. There might be some other white paints that you can use, but this one's really made for a real opaque application here. So, let's see if we can zoom in here. I'm going to go for like some splatters down here. It's fairly light, so it's not showing up very much. You know, if it's darker, you know, there's going to be more contrast. So, you know, something that's absent of a lot of color, or all color, you know, you want to kind of enhance the other things within that space, meaning, you know, light and shade, value, in this case, texture, you know, just to compensate for the absence of color. And then, when you do that, those types of things become much more prominent in here because there's no color. So things like texture, like that, okay, you know, play a much more key role in the piece, okay? Now, I like that. Now, I don't know if there would be any, I don't have like splashing water over here, but, you know, there's another fall over here, and I just like the texture, so I'm going to put some more over here just to create, you know, what I was talking about before with that continuity of pattern, texture, etc., lighting, okay? So we have some right here. I'm putting just some over here, too. And, I don't know, why don't we put some over here? I think this area right here is kind of boring, so, I don't know, just putting some stuff in there like that might be kind of interesting, you know, from a textural standpoint. It doesn't have to make, you know, perfect sense from a, I don't know, like a logical standpoint. And even up here, it might be kind of interesting to add some of that. So, why not? Okay, I don't hold this in my hand when I'm doing. I'm just doing this for the sake of the video, so you can see it being applied. Let's put some right over the front of the mill, too. Down here in San Diego, in the suburbs right now, there's a lot of thistle seed pods floating in the air everywhere. I think those balls kind of going around, these like little, I don't know, white little furry ball things, those little seed pods that, you know, travel in the wind. It's like an artichoke, you know, type of pod. But I'm seeing those all over the place. But, you know, not that that's what these things are, but, you know, you have these little things floating around in there. But see, just from a textural standpoint, do you see that splattering in here? It's not like you don't look at this place and say, oh my gosh, you know, look at, you know, this thing has been splattered with white paint. You know, it's very subtle, and you wouldn't be able to see it like at arm's distance like that. But, you know, when you go in like this and you see those types of things like that, you know, it's just, it adds a little bit more richness, visual richness to the overall. And of course down here where I've used it quite a bit, it really expanded that, you know, the visual language of this area down here in a, I believe, in a very interesting way. That's why I tend to use it so much in pieces. I tend to think that, you know, things can get a little bit more kind of, I don't know, amped up a little bit and interesting. Okay, let me see here. I think I tossed out my other, did I toss out my other? I had a real old cotton ball on my desk that I was using to apply white pigmenting. I think this one's the acrylic one and it doesn't work as good. I like a true cotton. Oh, yeah, let me see here. I bought a bag of it right here. Let me see. Yeah, this one's acrylic. I don't like that too much. The cotton works a little bit better. This is a really cheap bag of cotton. I need to go buy a bag at like Target or something instead. During this pandemic, I was at some grocery store and they had a these cotton balls here, but I didn't want to make a separate trip if I can get this, but I was thinking I should have just, I don't know, I still need to go over to like a Target and get, I don't know, maybe a name brand. Not that name brands are always better, but these ones are a little bit, I don't know, they're kind of textured. Okay, so after I get ink on here, I blot some of it off, and I'm also pushing it back into the cotton ball too. Okay, now normally I don't want a big blob of ink. Okay, sometimes if I want an area really illuminated and I have a lot of applications to put down, then I'll just ink up and I'll just go straight in here. But normally I'm kind of blotting some of it off before I take it in here. Okay. All right, so I'm going to reiterate a lot of what I did with the white pastel, whatever stick or whatever, in these areas right here. Okay. And hopefully we can expand on that real soft illumination down there. I don't know if you'll be able to tell what I'm doing here. It's going to be very apparent because, like a couple taps, you can barely see anything happening. So it's happening very slowly because I blotted it off first. So I'm kind of dry tapping it onto this scene here. Because I don't want a big, statement with this. I want to be able to build it up slowly, okay? When I say slowly, I mean it's not like 5 minutes or something like that. I'm talking about a couple seconds still, but... See that? I'm just kind of tapping around like that, and then I get that... See that real soft illumination like that? I think that looks really good with contrasting against, the sharper applications of that charcoal. Okay, so that is working just the way I'd hoped. See that real soft? And this works, this real soft applicator is doing rather well with that because it's a soft applicator. Everything else was hard media before, okay? Now, if you're really good at charcoal and everything like that, you can or pastels, you're going to do a lot better job at getting kind of a real soft look without having to do this, than I am. But I'm not, I'm not practiced at pastels or anything like that. So this is something that's really working for me very easily. Now, see, and I had to spray fix this off because if I was going like this into dry pastel right here that it's exposed, it's just going to get all over in here, okay? But we can see it as I'm tapping this with the spray fixative. It's not picking up any of that pastel, so it's just being applied directly onto the surface right here with no problem. Okay. Here's that base of this rock right here. I'm just kind of putting like a little bit of fog at the base of that. I think that, when you do something like that too, it makes those objects within this space look a lot more three-dimensional by having that texture in there. Because this kind of fog, it looks like it's enveloping an object, okay? So, that being said, I don't put it everywhere, okay? Now, like right here. So you can put it right here, but don't put it over here, so it looks like that fog's kind of wrapping around it. If you just put everything over everything, I mean, you could, but it'll look a little bit more flattened out again. This way, it's oscillating between sharp and kind of fuzzy, illuminated or whatever. Now see this area down here where I've left that area light, I'm putting in some of this white pigment ink, so it looks like there's kind of some of that back illumination kind of creeping through there. And when you get light shining on fog, mist, you get that kind of that illumination like that, okay? See that right there? And then we have it in the back of the trees. It's already got a head start because of those multi-value impressions going from wet to dry. Kind of depicting dark to light. with some real back illumination in here. I want to put this whole part of the front of the mill in a little bit of fog too, just so that it looks like the mill's a little bit more three-dimensional too. But see, I won't put it over the whole thing. I'm just kind of putting it over certain parts. So, like I said, it's an oscillation of the media. When you don't have everything treated the same way, you enhance each part of it. So if you put soft next to something really sharp, the sharp seems sharper, and the lights, the darks seem darker that way, okay? So you're playing contrasts one against one another. Okay, adding some of this up in the sky. I really like what's happening down here in the water especially, so I'm going to add a little bit more down that way. Kind of putting a little bit more in these trees, these background trees, I think. I think that looks kind of interesting. And I do kind of have concerns about overdoing something because it's entirely possible for me to do that. I get carried away. As should all of us, at least once in a while. We can do things kind of very measured and whatnot, but I always recommend to people that if you don't know when to stop, a lot of people have that kind of, those types of questions. How do you know when to stop, when it's done, okay? And I always just say, if you don't really know, then just keep working at it, and if you go over it, it's like, oh my god, I overworked it a little bit. That's all for the better, because it's always better than someone kind of putting on the brakes on things, rather than kind of going, further, and sometimes far, further than maybe they should have. But then if you don't do that once in a while, then you don't know kind of the maximum kind of boundaries of what could potentially add, to an overall piece and, look of something. I mean, that's like a lot of fun, though, too, isn't it? It's just kind of, just really going at it. Now, if I'm working on if you're working on a big piece and, you've been working on it for hours and hours and hours, and there's some process that you're about to do, where if you add it, there's, a point of no return. I do understand that, but, it's not like brush calligraphy or something like that, where we're doing like this big swatch and it's, going to be, fixed on something. You can do little type, like this. I'm doing little additions to it, and it's kind of dry brushing, so it doesn't come into focus like instantly. Like I don't go like this, I ruined it, you know what I mean, or something like that. It's usually through a process. So you have to kind of remember to, when you're working on something, you're often looking at it like this. But just remember to, take an arm's length view of it, pretty consistent. And then when you start kind of getting towards the end of a piece, where those types of questions are coming up of whether you should add something or not, look at it from distance like that. And then if you want to add a little bit more, then add more. But then, hold it at arm's distance again and check it out. Okay, so anyway, this is a paintbrush here. Let's use a little bit more of the bleed-proof white on a paintbrush. I'm going to do some real fine-tuned types of highlighting, in here. I don't know if I really need it, but adding in some kind of highlights on the top parts of certain things, you know, where it's going to be the most lit and illuminated, maybe. I'll just do some little kind of, let me see, let me take off some ink, or paint. I'll just do what they call it scumbling. It's where you kind of dry brush in a little bit, you know, paint or media over something. Add some to your moving water in some areas, maybe. Okay. Looking for little areas on the waterfall. I don't know. There's some areas on the trees. There's a little kind of a deciduous tree kind of sandwiched in between a couple evergreens here, and you can add a little bit of a kind of highlights on some of those areas. Around the watermill, and the wheel maybe. Fairly dimensional, I think. Each one of these little processes is, I think it's kind of adding to the overall look a little bit. This is definitely the most like painting I've done on a piece in a long time. You know, it's usually I'm using the white paint pens or gel pens or something like that for kind of a painted look in certain areas, but this is quite a bit here. But we might as well. It's always kind of fun to see. Like I said, it's always fun to kind of test out new media and different combinations of media and surface. All right. So how does that look? Fairly lively down there at the base. You know, this, I don't know what it would look like on a coated paper. Not glossy coated, but matte coated paper. Glossy coating is not going to take charcoals and things like that, but I don't know. I'm pretty happy with this piece here, and you know, it's not really so much the end result. It's kind of the process by which you know, experience, you know, when doing it. Is it fun? And for me, I would say that I'm not so much into that charcoal process, but I do like it in terms of the look. For me, which might be true for dye-based inks and everything like that too, but I really have fun adding in all these other types of embellishments, like especially like that white pigment ink. I really like doing that. The Dr. Martens splatter painting, I liked how that looked. But, you know, in order to get to this area where I could do that, I had to go through those preliminaries with the charcoal and whatnot. I like using, I'd probably like using the charcoal on a little bit more higher quality paper, but in this case here, I don't feel that, you know, just very plain, ordinary, uncoated paper is holding this back from kind of achieving, you know, this type of look that I would have achieved on a higher quality paper, if that makes sense. So I think this is pretty good for this type of thing here. And, you know, there's a lot of people out there that are really good with things like pastels. So that pastel would work really good on this type of paper right here, I think. And I don't know. I don't think, you know, a certain type of paper would, you know, enhance it greatly. But I could be mistaken. I don't know, because I don't do this a lot, or, you know, at all, really. So anyways, yeah. Um, I'm going to actually title this piece right here. The other ones have just been kind of, you know, Staples experiment or whatever. But I really like the look of this one. And I especially like kind of what's going on down in this area down here at the base right there with all those different textures in there. I wasn't even thinking about the splatter painting type of touch in here, but if you're using something like charcoals and something like that, or pastels, and if you want like a nice zip of, you know, some other types of textures in here, that's a pretty fun thing to add on top of there. And it makes for a really nice contrast because, you know, charcoals are not about, you know, they're just not about like high detail. So it's more of this kind of general feel, but if you want to kind of extend the range of textural sharpness in a piece, you know, something going from very soft to very sharp like that. And it could be very subtle too, like in these areas right here, you can see that little, you know, spot of, you know, white paint in there. You can try something with the Dr. Martens like that. So, I don't know, maybe this kind of process right here, even more so than maybe some other ones, because, you know, maybe it's just me not having control over it. It's kind of about all those little types of expanded ranges of all the different media in here. Charcoal, dark to light, soft and sharp, and I don't know, what else did we do in here? I guess that's it, you know, and the little sharp kind of areas of highlighting, you know, with some additional tones on top of those rocks and right there. Kind of bring things into greater focus and whatnot. So I don't know. So further experiments to go, but I'm enjoying kind of learning about this media, and I don't know. Looking forward to seeing what we could do the next time, and I guess that's what it's all about in terms of looking forward. Your current piece, if it makes you look forward to kind of getting to the next one, I think that's what it's all about too, isn't it? Okay, so anyways, if you have any questions, drop me in the comment section. Thanks as always for tuning into the channel.